All right, so that's going. You guys can hear me. We got a slide deck.
We got 2 people?
I got Devin Knight in the room. Man, what a Thursday. It is Thursday, right?
I think so.
That's good because I need it to be Thursday. It can't be Friday yet because we have too much to do this week. I don't know if everybody on the meeting agrees with us. They might want it to be Friday.
Yes.
But, you guys can make it Friday. I mean, just, don't come back tomorrow.
Make it your personal Friday?
Just make it your personal Friday.
I like that.
3-day weekend for, whatever holiday you want it to be.
Adam gives you permission to a 3-day weekend.
I'll write you a note. Just send me an email. I'm sure everybody will take that from me. So, guys, welcome to Pragmatic Works on Thursday. We're talking about building an efficient and world-class analytics team. I'm Adam Jorgensen. I've got Devin Knight with me. And our goal today is really to take the views that we get from, running our consulting and training business to talk to you about what we see, right? And, we see, from a team development perspective, from a team composition perspective, how are people sort of looking at projects, looking at their own development? How are they looking at how they make up their teams?
Yes, hiring teams.
Right.
Yep.
How are they hiring and growing teams? And so we're going to talk about all of those things. And so hopefully those are interesting things to you. We'll probably have some feedback questions after the webinar, right? If we could get your help, answering some things. But we'll jump right in. And, we picked this topic, very specifically because one of the things that we see when we go into customers is they either have a data and analytics team that's really good, or they have one that's meh. I'll just call it meh, right?
Meh.
And that could be they're just overwhelmed with a backlog. That could be that they don't have the sort of up-to-date skill sets, maybe because the team's not motivated to get it, or because they just haven't had time or the resources to get it, right? There's 100 reasons why a team can go from being awesome to meh, right? And so our goal today is to talk about how we get from meh back to awesome, right?
I like it.
And so, it's important to have a world-class data and analytics team because it's a strategic advantage. The companies that we go into, 97% of the Fortune 100, right, has Pragmatic Works as a provider. Mm-hmm. And so when we go into those companies, they might be big, powerful, amazing companies, but sometimes it's pretty clear who's the market leader and who's trying to catch up. And my favorite companies to go into are the ones that are trying to catch up.
Yeah.
The second or third, we'll call them, sort of place in the market, because most of them have their eye on first place.
Right.
And what they want to do is find out, how do we overtake that market leader? How do we out-innovate them? How do we create a new product? How do we get an acquisition that gives us strategic placement, right? What do you need to be able to make those decisions? You need information. You need insight. You need data. So what do? They go to their data team and they go, okay, guys, here's what we need to do. And if the data team goes, oh, no, I don't know, that's going to take like 12 weeks. And then we have to deploy a server. And I don't know if our platform can do that. And Susie's the only one who knows how to do that. And she's out for working in another office for a couple weeks, right? If all they hear is reasons why we can't do it, you've lost that strategic advantage.
Yeah.
If they go to that team and that team has the capacity and the capability to embrace that, then you really have a strategic advantage. If the leadership of that team can go to a meeting and say, you know what, CEO, CFO, you give that to us, we'll get you guys the insight, we'll get whatever it is back to you. The companies that are moving rapidly up through their market are the ones that have teams and have capability that can do that. So we'll talk about how they got there in a few minutes. The other thing it does is it reduces trial and error. There's a lot of back and forth when it comes to data analysis, report development, dashboarding, just the whole concept of acquiring information, getting it into some kind of storage or staging, whether that's a database, data warehouse, data lake, blob storage, files, whatever it is, right? We won't say SharePoint because that's not really a thing, right?
You're gonna hurt somebody's feelings.
It's okay. It won't be the first time. But it reduces trial and error because you don't have to try 15 different ways. You sort of know the pattern, you know the right way to go. You've kept up to date on the new stuff, and so even if you have to try something, you're going to be able to iterate more quickly, get solutions deployed faster, and that's really the name of the game. Going from I need this from the business to you have this and it's awesome,
right?
Right? That time window, you guys can't see my hands, but I'm talking with them a lot. That time window is super, super important. And I have seen everything from, hey, that's great, we'll get that up in a couple of days for a relatively reasonable request to, yeah, our timeline for that's about 16 months. I can't think of any decision. Right, yeah, Devin just threw up in his mouth a little bit. I can't think of any decision where I'm allowed a timeline of 16 months to do anything. Right? And so having a team that can support and drive that is super, super important. It also increases your confidence in your go-to-market, right? If you're, if our sales team here at Pragmatic Works knows that the data that we're giving them is good data, that's valuable data on, what customers need and are looking for and where we can be valuable and not just try to sell them a product just to sell them a product, right? We want to have good partnering relationships that move businesses forward. That means our sales team needs to understand what customers actually want. And that means we have to do that work. We have to do that analysis. We have to have good data, and we have to have a way that gets it to them in a timely manner. And it increases their confidence in our go-to-market motion. The same thing in companies of all types and all sizes, right? We have a sports team that's a client of ours, and they are doing a lot of work on fan engagement, right? They want the fans to use their mobile app more. They want the fans to use the mobile app in the stadium or the arena a lot more, because they can order food to their chair and all these different types of engagement. They can order souvenirs, right? If you're there with your son or your daughter, or just if you want something, you can order a pennant or a sweatshirt or a foam finger or any number of the types of things instead of going and waiting in line in a break in the game, right? You can order those things to your seats, and that's what they want. They want to be able to have that fan experience. They want that concierge level experience for their fans. Well, how are they going to be able to get that? That is a massive data ingestion, processing, analysis type of activity. And which fans do you target for that? So that was their big question, is we can't afford to deploy this to every seat in the stadium on the first go because it's crazy expensive, as you can imagine, right? Just Wi-Fi coverage and everything is so expensive. And so they needed the confidence to be able to deploy something to a particular set of their audience, right? And so they didn't pick the most expensive seats. They didn't pick like the luxury boxes, right? They picked a certain subsegment of their season ticket holders, which they know are the most reliable. They did some basic machine learning. I mean, really basic. It wasn't that complicated. Just to kind of profile based on what people spend and what they spend when they come to the games to segment that. And it was an awesome pilot. But in order to get that to work, they had to get that done in like 6 or 8 weeks, which is a relatively short timeline.
Right.
They needed a good team, and they had pretty much everything they needed except for kind of one specialty role. And we brought that in, which was great. But their team was awesome. We plugged right in. We got everything done. They knew their environment. They knew their business, and it was great, right? And so, the thing to remember is every company out there has a data team, right? When I talk to people and they're looking for a new job, because a lot of times they'll call and say, hey, I'm thinking about making a change. What do you think? And I say, well, where else are you considering going? And if I happen to know more about their metro, I'll throw out some company names, and they'll just say, oh, I don't know about that place, or oh, I'd really like to work there. And I'll say, well, what's driving that? They say, oh, I've heard about the team over there, and they're not so hot, right? But I've also heard about this team over at company B, and they're doing some pretty amazing things. So how do I, get involved in that, right? And the interesting thing today is talent is gravitating to where the action is, right? There's plenty of people who want to sit there and, triage queries all day. And that might be fun and exciting for them. But for a lot of people, they want to build things that are really going to move the business forward. They don't want to just watch if something's online or firefight because the app dev team just keeps breaking things and they don't have the right control to deal with that. Devin, sometime I'll tell you about my first DBA triage job fixing an app that was all XML in a SQL 2000 database.
Ooh.
Right.
Please don't tell me about that.
Yes. Maybe we'll need a beverage when we go through that. So if we talk about that, and we're talking about the center of where people are thinking about going, right? And what makes a world-class team, what makes an efficient team, I look at it as basically 4 things, right? They kind of roll up under 4 things. And so this is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to focus on sort of what these are and why they're important. And then I'm going to have Devin help us understand what does that actually mean for people who are trying to get from where they are to being able to really live up to, quote unquote, live up to some of these, higher ideals, right? And so the number one thing, there's a reason I put it first. It's the number one thing we look for when we're hiring people is attitude. Mm-hmm. Attitude is everything. You do not have to know everything. I have news for you. You don't. I don't. Devin doesn't. Nobody does. A huge red flag for me on an interview when I'm talking to somebody and I say, where would you rate yourself on like a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, I'm a 10 on X, right? Whatever it is. Power BI, SSIS, Azure, whatever it is. Immediate red flag. One, I think there might be a bit of a humility problem. Right. I understand wanting to, present confidence, right? But also, the attitude should be I always have more to learn because there is always more to learn. And having an attitude that says, I want to be customer responsive, right? I want to understand my business. I want to know what they're trying to do. I want to constantly be learning. So I want to be getting better. I want to learn from my peers, even if I know something they don't know and vice versa. How do we help each other? Because that right attitude will translate into aptitude. If you're focused on being a person who's growing, who's connected to your business, who's focused on creating value and not focused on sort of a land grab, like, well, this is my platform or these are my applications. If your focus is not about you, if it's outward facing, you have the right attitude, that aptitude is going to come. Yep. Because there's so many ways for people to learn and get better and improve, either tactically or, with a longer term plan. Devin will talk more about that, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But once you have the attitude and the aptitude, you got to be able to shift gears, right? Yeah. One day you got to be flying along on a POC, driving that Ferrari up the road, and then the next day you got to build a production version of that and slow down a little bit, right? Put the family in the van and make sure everybody's safe and everybody's secure and everything gets to where it needs to go. And if that means that you come off of the thing that you're used to and you go to the thing that you're not used to, and that means you got to work a little bit extra hours or work on a weekend and learn something or pick up some skills, if you've got the right attitude and you're looking for the aptitude, then that adaptability is going to be core to helping you get there. And last but not least is acceleration. You want to have an attitude as your business is trying to move fast. I can tell you every single executive meeting that I go to with customers, and we talk, typically I start the meeting after we intro and things like that if I don't already know them. My priority is their priorities. And so it's important for me to understand, what are they trying to do? Are they going through a lot of M&A? We have a customer right now that's trying to go from being a $3.4 billion company to being an $8 billion company in 16 months.
Wow.
That's a lot of $1 billion.
Yeah, it is.
In not a lot of months. And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to do it through M&A. And they expect to acquire 100 plus companies in the next 16 months. Wow. They started a whole other company just to do the M&A, right? Because that's a huge strategic investment for them. So what does that mean their priority is? It's a lot of integration, right? They got to bring those systems together. They're not even trying to bring them together. They basically built a new one that's designed for stuff to be integrated rapidly, right? And that's kind of what we help them figure out. And so you need to understand what your business's priorities are at the level that you can understand them and what's shared with you. But the ability to accelerate to meet, new deadlines and new types of ideas, a lot of times it's the first one to market with something that wins. Yeah. Really, right? Lots of people have good ideas, but your business is typically trying to move at different speeds, either during different times of the year, right? One of my best friends is the lead data architect at Intuit, right? And, one of the things that she's very clear about is certain times of the year, tax time, right? They need to be very adaptable and need to move very, very quickly, right? Because that's peak season for any tax providing type of company, as you can imagine. So being able to accelerate and combining that with a great attitude, growing aptitude, the ability to adapt, those things really make a world-class team and an efficient team because they work well together and they continue to move the business forward.
One thing I noticed too about that is, and you briefly touched on this before, if you're trying to hire that world-class data team or world-class analytics team, the things that you mentioned there were never technology focused. It wasn't focused on, hey, I need to hire someone that already knows how to do Azure Machine Learning or Azure Data Factory or Power BI. It was, you can hire someone that maybe is at least familiar with a competitive product, like
Right.
Tableau, maybe,
Yeah.
and you're trying to build a Power BI team. If they know Tableau and they have those characteristics that you mentioned, they will likely pick up another tool like Power BI very quickly, even if that's not something they're familiar with.
Yeah, if you're hiring the right person, the tooling should never be an issue.
Yeah.
Right? The platform should never be an issue. Now, you just mentioned a great point, right? You want them sort of skilled in the space.
Right.
Right? But bringing somebody on board, you want to build the team you need, not the catalog of technical skills that you need.
Yeah.
Because if you build the catalog of technical skills you need, you could have a terrible team, but you'll have a catalog of technical skills.
Yeah.
I'd always rather build the team that I need and then, strategically inject the skills, right? Whether that's helping them learn it, which we'll talk about, or bringing in somebody from the outside to handle one piece that your team can't cover, right? Or handing off management to somebody else so that your team can focus on growing. That's something a lot of our customers do, right, with managed services. So when you have your team and you're wondering, maybe we're somewhere in the middle, right? We know we're not meh. We have a lot of pride, but we don't think we're maybe hitting on all the cylinders we just talked about. And so how does a leader go about assessing their team? And I think the first thing is you got to define the vision for the team and how they help your business be successful. So going back to what Devin just said, it's not really about technology. What are the types of outcomes you need to be able to produce for your business, right? Do you need to be able to bring data in from the outside faster? Okay, let's get some skills and capability on how to do that. Do you need somebody who's more business facing so you can understand what the business is trying to get from the data more often? Okay, let's make sure that we've got people in those roles who know how to do that. Do you need more help on the executive sponsorship side, right? Do you have too many competing priorities and they're all fighting for number one, but it's maybe not clear, right? You need people, you need leadership who can step in and do that. And if you take that and you turn that into sort of a 12 or 16 month vision for what your team is going to own and be responsible for and what the priorities are, bring the team in and share it with them and say, okay, listen, gang, this is what we got to do. This is what we're on the hook for. How do you guys feel about this? Are you, where do you feel we have gaps? Don't just bring them in and go, here's where our gaps are, right? Let them tell you and let that color what you're, doing in terms of a gap analysis. But that gap analysis is super important. It can be done pretty quickly. I do it on our team about once every 6 months just to make sure we're, facing the market correctly, that we're helping customers correctly, that we're just aligned, right? And that helps us look for the right kinds of individuals and backgrounds to bring on board. And so then you can take that gap analysis and turn it into a wish list. And on the training side, we see that a lot, right? Customers are like, oh, we've been through this, and here's where we need help, right?
You see that quite a bit, So that and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I don't want to trumpet too much yet.
So going from that gap analysis to getting where you want to be, right? Get to that world-class level. Rate your team on those 4 A's, right? Go through and say, how's Bob and Joe and Susie and Rachel's attitude, right? How are those things, just do like a little 1 to 3 rating, right? Keep it, but be specific. If you say 2, I find I never give anybody a 2. It's either a 1 or a 3. Like 2 is sort of like, oh, we'll give them a 2. It's okay. You shouldn't ever just be okay, right? If it's just okay, it's probably not good. And if it's good, then it's probably great, right? Help people move in the right direction. Find those chores and low-hanging fruit. What was it, like 73% of time for those teams in the poll?
It was
just like managing and triaging and like just the day-to-day drudgery of managing those environments.
Right.
And that's not motivating. It's not fun. It's not innovative. It's not really helping the business move forward. It's helping the business run. It's super important work. Right. And a lot of our customers have partnered with us for us to sort of take that workload and manage that for them, especially in Power BI and Azure Data and that kind of thing, so that they can focus, right? Because you have to create capacity for improvement, right? You can't just go out and tell your team who's already working 50, 60 hours a week, good news, guys, now you got to go train for 15 hours, right? There needs to be capacity for improvement. And that doesn't just mean going out and hiring headcount. We can get really creative around that. One of the things that I like to do for the team is periodically, not every 90 days, but periodically set some aggressive 90-day stretch goals that we can attack as a team, right? That it's not just Devin's 90-day goals or Adam's 90-day goals. It's let's do this as a team. And part of that is to maybe upskill some other people, get creative with some of those team activities. You've got some great examples of stuff we're going to talk about, things like hackathons and things like that. We'll talk about it a little bit. But help people create specific plans and targets. Bind that time down really tight, though. Don't do 6 and 12-month goals. I mean, that takes forever, right? Then you're waiting a year to figure out, are you really on track? You're reevaluating every quarter. It's this very sort of, we'll call it legacy mentality. That's probably the nicest way I can put that. Help the team find the right rhythm, right? The rhythm is probably not this slow quarterly plod into oblivion. It's a faster 90-day attitude, aptitude, adaptability type of motion that will help your team learn and grow and accomplish things in smaller bites, but do it a lot faster. And by putting that plan into action and then sort of socializing the results, people are going to look around the company and be like, man, we got to do what Devin's team is doing.
People are competitive. Groups are competitive.
Yes. You will raise the whole level of what's happening inside your organization. And people will notice. People, not only that, but people inside the company will want to come work for your team.
Yeah.
You will be amazed at the line that forms outside the door, and you'll be like, no, we're closed for business, guys. No, you gotta. It's hard work to get on this team, right? We're special. Are you special? You don't seem super special to me, right? Don't do that. That's sort of mean. But people are gonna want to come and want to be a part of that. And the best part is the people that don't. Maybe you have some people on the team right now that are like, oh, this is terrible and it's hard and why are we trying to move faster, and even though the boss made capacity and handed off all these things to Pragmatic Works to help with, I don't want to learn these new things, I've been doing this for a long time, or I thought I was going to be able to do this when I came into the team and now it's something different and I don't like it. That's meh.
Right.
You got to get rid of that. And I don't like to tell you that you have the wrong people, but some of you probably do have some of the wrong people. So maybe find a place where that person can be better utilized in the company, or help them find a new opportunity somewhere else and free up that capacity. But you can't just ask more and more and more of your team without creating some capacity. I think that's an important message that people need to hear. As leaders, I think we sometimes need to be reminded of that.
Yeah, sure.
There's a limited amount of horsepower to any team, no matter how amazing they are. Mm-hmm. And we see that, right? Even when we put people on the ground, right? Our team is really world class. I know I'm a little biased, but I truly believe that. And we'll see some of that in sort of our pace that we want to push the customer sometimes versus their normal pace, right? And so we kind of help everybody sort of step up their game. But in order to do that, once you create that capacity, maybe you've handed off some of that workload to, managed service or somebody to help handle the drudgery and the chores and the day-to-day and all that kind of stuff so you can focus on what you need to. You got to focus on getting those skills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I took this from the approach of let's focus on a technology, even though we're talking more generically about your analytics team. When we get down to talking about the skills, it's always easier to do that when you talk specific to a technology. And frankly, a lot of these skills apply to multiple technologies. Now, obviously, here you can see from the list here, these are pretty focused on Power BI because that's what we're seeing a lot of our business around. But really, this could apply to various different technologies as well. And think about this. Whenever you're building that analytics team, is it for more of a Power BI solution? Is it more for machine learning or IoT? You can change what this list of skills are, but I want to talk a little bit about that from this perspective, and then we can think through, how do we gain these skills? So from a Power BI perspective, a big aspect is taking that data and actually cleansing it, right? No one on this call has perfect data. If you think you do, you're lying. Adam's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes we go to a customer like, our data's good.
Yeah, okay.
I'm like, we should just go home. we should try this meeting again tomorrow.
Yeah. So a big aspect of this, obviously, is getting that data prepared in a way where you can use it properly for an analytics purpose. A part of that, and you can kind of combine these two together in some cases, but once that data is cleansed, you then want to organize it and model it. So the idea here of data modeling would be you have 10, 12, 30 data sources in some cases that you're pulling from, and you need to be able to find some way that those data sources relate to each other and work together. And that's that data modeling aspect, to be able to bring together those data sources and define how they relate to each other. And not only that, but on top of that, be able to write, in this case, DAX calculations. So DAX being the data analysis expression language where you can build out formulas that define what your business needs. So if your business is trying to define what profit is, and you have 10 different people or 10 different departments in your company that define profit differently, you want to be able to, show that metric in a way that everybody understands, and what is the definitive way that profits, defined for the company.
And that actually, DAX is a great example of your earlier point about if somebody comes from another technology.
Yeah.
Right. So DAX is something sort of specific around Power BI and tabular modeling, but it's actually written for folks who come from Excel.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
So people who have an Excel background or another type of analysis or data analyst type of background are going to be able to pick that up easy, right? If they have all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they have, Adam's right. If they have that Excel formula background, then they're going to see a lot of skill translation when it comes over to DAX. The next one here, the data visualization side. Obviously, this is the sexy part that always is what gets people excited. But I made it pretty specific, not just data visualization, but data visualization best practices. So I do a lot of presentations and a lot of classes where we have people will show me their dashboards they've been working on, and I can pat them on the head and say, "Hey, that's a good job, nice try."
You don't actually pat them on the head.
I don't. But the thing that I notice most often is throwing so much information at once on one screen and kind of overwhelming the users. And so it's definitely a skill that can be learned. There's a little bit of an art form to it that goes along with the practice and the skill of being able to know how to use the technology. And to go along with that, there's really the concept of being able to tell stories with your data too. Take the data that you have and not just plop everything on a dashboard for them, but actually guide them through the data and show them guide them to the end result that they should be following. Otherwise, you might have them going down another route that, it may not be necessarily the purpose of the report or the analytics you're doing. So you want to make sure you give them some guidance in there, and having the storytelling around it is a big aspect of that. The administration side, this goes into what Adam was talking about with managed services. This is a big aspect that you almost have to look at this. These are a lot of skills. Do you really need everyone on your team to know all these skills? And that's a little bit of a debate I'm going to bring up on one of my last slides here that maybe Adam and I can debate back and forth a little bit. So do you need your team, the same people that are doing the data cleansing, the data modeling, the report writing, the dashboards, also to know the ins and outs of administration? Is that someone else that manages that? Could that be a third party that manages that? That's something that you need to consider and think about. The data governance, this is oftentimes a piece that's overlooked when people get started with analytics projects is, how do I want to standardize and have a data governance process built into the solutions that we design? So it's great that we have all these other skills, but from a bigger picture, what's our standardization around what we're doing from a data governance side? So that's a big aspect here as well. So the question is, these are a lot of skills, and this is specific to Power BI. You might be using different analytics platforms. How do you gain these skills? And there's various ways you can obviously gain skills. Thank you, Adam. You could learn it through osmosis, like the picture over here, or the way that realistically people learn skills is
that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. You can't just put books on your head.
But I have so many books.
I know.
This would be so much better.
I think we even have an old fun video we did where you had a strainer
else on my head.
A strainer on your head, and you were getting exactly. But you can learn with various ways, right? You can join free webinars like you're in today and the ones that we do on Tuesdays, and other companies do those obviously as well. You could read up on blogs and gather a list of people that you really trust and want to follow, and whenever they write new things, you can learn that way. Obviously, books are still a thing, by the way, Adam. I don't know if you're familiar with this. The books you can still get in stores.
I have them, but I was collecting them.
Yeah.
I was thinking, someday I'll have to prove to my children these exist.
I usually just use them to sit on whenever I have to do a video next to you, because you're so much taller than me.
Yes, those are good. We have those good sequel books for that.
Yeah, exactly. So books are a great way. YouTube, that's obviously one to specifically call out. It has a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of content on. It's the second most popular search engine right behind Google. So yeah, sorry Bing. YouTube is the second way that people find their information.
Poor Bing.
I like Bing. Doing more formal training is another way. So on-site training, where you actually have someone on site and come to your location and someone train you for a week or a day or a couple days, whatever it may be, to get you more focused training. And then, of course, there's more things like web-based on-demand learning. Now, we really actually, our company, Pragmatic Works, really facilitates all of these. We have free webinars. Obviously, you're sitting in one right now. We have a corporate blog and individual blogs for the people we work with. We write books. I wrote a Power BI book last October. We have a very thorough YouTube channel that has content that we constantly upload to it.
It's crazy how much content is on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Azure Everyday videos. We have videos on how we update, what the updates for Power BI were. Brian did a series on Power Apps. There's a lot of stuff. Even all of our webinars go out there. And then, of course, you have to determine what's best for your team. So one of the things that a lot of people realize rather quickly is really some of those first 4 options: free webinars, blogs, books, YouTube. There's not a lot of accountability behind that. There's not a lot of focus around it. You're kind of poking around. You're hoping you find what you need, especially when you look at things like YouTube and free training. You're not going to get enough information to become that master or to become really that world-class organization that you're hoping for. That world-class analytics team is not going to become world-class from watching a bunch of 5-minute YouTube videos. So while those tools can be helpful, the last 2 are really what companies have found to be most successful. On-site training, where you have someone come on-site, that's great. But what we've actually been focused on and building and spending a lot of our time is our on-demand learning. What we're trying to do with our on-demand learning is something different that you can't find in other organizations that do this sort of training. The big piece of our on-demand learning that we've added recently that's really designed to make more of an accountability effort through on-demand learning. So it's not so much, hey, I bought this for you, I hope you get something out of it.
Right.
We've really been making a big effort to push our users and push our subscribers to have a path that they're focused on. So we've launched something called a learning path. So you can actually sign up yourself through our platform. Even through our trial, you can sign up for a learning path that guides you through the classes that, if you say you want to be a data scientist, or you want to be an Azure developer or a Power BI analyst, you can select that learning path, and then we give you the guidance on what you should do and in what order. So while we might have 13 different Power BI classes, we feel like you can be a Power BI analyst after you take 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
The other ones are really helpful to kind of bolster you in those areas, but we have some core classes that we think you should take to be able to really become that expert.
Yeah, and one of the first things that happens that we see, Devin, is once the team creates that capacity, right, by sort of handing off, either adding some headcount or handing off some of those, admin type duties, right, to somebody to manage those. The first thing they say is, okay, now where do we go from here?
Right.
Right. And we need to learn Power BI. We need to learn Databricks. We need to learn, all these other technologies. Right now we know we have the right people. So now we can get on the technologies.
Yeah.
And they've done their gap analysis. They've done all those things. And the learning path just shortcuts it all for them.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they just log in, sign up, and they go, oh, here's what I need to do. 3 or 4 classes. I'm good. Maybe sort of certification, those types of things. And we've got lots of great resources to help them get there.
Yeah, and this comes back, we've mentioned this a couple times now. Again, you don't have to necessarily hire for the technology. Hire for the attitude, the aptitude. There's 4 A's that we talked about. And then based on that, people that have those 4 A's or have elements of those 4 A's can learn. And if you give them a tool that helps them learn quickly and gives them a path, they're going to pick it up pretty quickly, and they're going to have the right attitude towards learning as well. All right, so let's talk about that. So what's the next step here to push your team to be able to pick up these skills? Adam talked about it as well. It's always good to have goals set. So have some short-term goals. Again, you can see in my example here, I don't have yearly goals as well. Our goals are all short-term here. So have a monthly goal that you should know how to do X. You should know how to be able to use bookmark. Just using Power BI as an example here again. I should have a goal here by the end of the week or the end of the month to be able to create a report that really does tell a story. And by the end of the quarter, I should be able to actually implement that with our data and be able to create a solution that really guides our users through doing this, and not only just creating it, but doing it and having it in production. So you should have some kind of bigger quarterly goal there that's maybe based off that monthly goal. And then another big piece here is find out what motivates your team. If you're struggling to get them to focus on learning, you can see my screen, my image here on the sorry, but I'm not interested. Sorry, I'm not interested in learning. Maybe it's a matter of finding out what motivates them. So there might be a variety of things that motivate them that you're not thinking about. So maybe it's competition between coworkers. So you want to be able to make some and bolster some competition where you can see who reaches that certain goal, that certain learning goal that you're getting them towards. And then, of course, you can do things that are a little more fun. So maybe buy lunch for the team when they reach their goal, or even buy lunch as a as an effort to help them reach their goal, where maybe they're doing a little lunch and learn together and you're trying to help encourage that. It's a great way to be able to get them together. So the big thing is, through maybe your one-on-ones whether you have with your team or whatever that gap analysis, figure out what motivates your team to be able to be better. What would motivate them to be that world-class team? And then finally, again, defining learning paths. Now, we have learning paths that are defined within inside of our learning platform, but you can, of course, find out what is the specific learning path you want for your team. Maybe there's multiple things you need them to learn. You need them to learn Power BI, but you also need them to learn elements of Azure like Data Factory or Databricks like we brought up before. So find out what are those key things you need. What are the bigger picture things that your organization needs to be better in the future? And then set plans, set a path so that it's really clear on what your team needs to get there. And then the last thing I want to kind of talk about here, and by the way, if you have, make sure you plug in some questions. If you have, we're going to have some time for questions set aside here. So
yeah, it looks like we have a couple. So
do we good?
We'll
yeah.
do those in a minute.
Yeah, if you have some thoughts or some questions that you'd like answered, make sure you go ahead and plug those in now so Adam and I will have some time to answer them. But the last thing I want to talk about here is just some other considerations when it comes to building that team. And I want to get some banter here a little bit with Adam as well on these. So some of the things that you might consider is, do you have that specialist in one area? And we can focus this in on Power BI for this discussion at least. So do you have that specialist that's great at report writing, but doesn't know much on the administration side or doesn't know as much on the data cleansing side? They're more focused on building reports based off of a model that somebody else create. Or is the alternative is you have that jack of all trades. Maybe you're a smaller company or maybe not, but you have that jack of all trades that needs to or wants to know everything and dig deeper into all the different scenarios. So what do you think? I don't necessarily think there's a wrong answer here, but what do you think?
No, I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think that a lot of this depends on the size of the company.
Yeah.
Right. So you go to a huge Fortune 1 company, right? They're going to have a much larger team, more responsibility. People may have more sort of specialized skills depending on the platforms. You go to a smaller company like a credit union network or some of the other sort of mid-size companies that we work with, and their people need to support more, right? They don't have the money for 45 people on a team. They have 6 people, right? And so you have somebody who's maybe a DBA and doing development work, and doing maybe some report writing even, right? They can go across all those things where in a larger company, the report writer would absolutely never be the DBA.
Right.
They would even be very different teams, right?
Of course.
I think that for me personally, I like being sort of jack of all trades, right? I've been a specialist in my career and I've been a jack of all trades. The jack of all trades to me is more fun.
Yeah.
I get to, sort of be involved in more things. It also gives me people who are a jack of all trades a lot of times have more context on sort of the bigger picture on the team's goals because they're seeing it from different perspectives.
They understand the why more.
Right, even if they're not as deep on some of those perspectives. So, I think for some people you just have to decide, but I think if you're going to be a specialist, now with the way that technology is changing, you got to really stay up on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You may be a specialist in something today and need to become a specialist in a totally different thing next year. Yeah. And that can be hard if you're not keeping your hand in some of those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And both from a training and a services perspective, if you're a specialist, that means that maybe there's things that you want to take off people's plate. You want them so focused on the report writing that you don't want to have other things start to peer into their focus. So, for example, if they're a report writer, you probably don't want them touching a ton of administration stuff, right? That'll just bog them down with things that's not their focus. So there's things like we talked about managed services as an option.
We see that so much though, right?
Yeah, right.
And it comes from a couple of places, right? We don't want to turn it over to IT.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes data teams are like, well, we're not really IT.
Right.
Right? IT is this kind of like bad department or shadow department, right? With this rep, right? Well, they used to run it. They didn't do a good job, so we took it back, right? And every conversation about owning a platform that I've ever heard in a customer, I've also heard on an elementary school playground about a kickball. Right? And it's just slightly different words. Yeah. And so, I think that it is important to understand what you really want. What's the most valuable thing your team can work on? Yeah. Keep them focused on that. Find a way to create capacity for the other stuff.
Absolutely. And the same thing from a training perspective. We have courses that are specific to data storytelling. I brought that up earlier. We have a data storytelling class. We have courses on specific Excel traits. Like if you really need to become an expert on pivot tables in Excel, we have things like that we can focus your attention on. So there's a lot of ways that we can help you out there. Another interesting way to really, and this goes along with motivating your team that we talked about on the previous slide, but it's always best to find some real world way to jumpstart your team into the things that they've learned. So if you send them to a course, or you focus them on something new that you want them to learn, get them experience in actually doing the thing that they just learned very quickly with your data. So you don't necessarily have to use your data in a course, for example, but very quickly after that, you'll want to have some kind of event or just some kind of project focus using your data shortly after it. A great way to do that is through something called hackathons. So many of you may be familiar with hackathons, but the idea, at least there's variations of this, of course, but the idea here being, let's get everybody together. Let's see in a day, let's say, for example, in a day, I want to see how far we can get on solving problem X with this new technology, for example, that we learned. So we just learned this technology now. We want to solve this problem. Let's pair up in teams and see how we can actually solve different elements of it and then pull it together and see how far you can get in a short amount of time. That's one of the really exciting things. You almost lock yourself in a room, bring in lunch, focus the day on solving that one problem, keep it focused.
But we do these for all kinds of things in our business.
Yeah.
We do them for building out new training classes.
Yep.
Right? Get everybody together, focus, get it done, learn something new. We do it for building out new consulting products. We do it for writing new marketing content. Right?
Yeah.
We even do it for we're updating a ton of things on our website over the next month or two, and that means a lot of updates, a lot of work, a lot of content. Our marketing team, is awesome, and they pulled a bunch of people together, and we did a hackathon to basically reboot what we're doing there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree, Devin. It's an awesome way to get the team together. Maybe force a little bit of teamwork if they're not used to working together. A lot of teams aren't used to working. They're used to working near each other, but not together.
Right.
And sometimes we gotta drive that. Now you have certifications on here.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll mention about the hackathons. If you try to do something like that, eliminate all distractions, no email, nobody opens their email.
Oh yeah.
Turn off any communicator devices, Skype, Teams, whatever you use.
Just go dark.
Go dark. Complete focus. That's a big piece of it. So certifications is an interesting piece here because we get a lot of this asked when it comes to how you should focus your team's learning. And I've actually changed on certifications over time. Now I have a few certifications myself, and we may even differ on opinions on this. So I actually think there'd be interesting banter here. But my opinion on certifications has changed. In the past, I actually didn't have as high a value on certifications as others may have, because really for me, having that experience doing the work, being able to see, oh, you've done this before, is even better than a certification could possibly be. But as technology has changed and we're working with different types of technology and technology that changes on a weekly basis, even in some cases, it's the value of those certifications is not nearly where it has been in the past for me personally. So right now, it's more important that you even have, not more important, but it's as important or more important than it has been to me in the past that people have certifications, because it does show that even though this technology is so new and it's going to be difficult for you to have that experience in it, that you still have something that proves, yeah, I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So my thoughts on that have changed. What do you think, Adam? Yeah,
I think that, one of the things we talked about before the meeting was it used to be that, a new technology would come out, let's say a new version of SQL Server, right? SQL Server 2008.
Yeah.
And then it's like 4 years before even a new version comes out or really new functionality gets added. So there was all this time, right? So you could go out and take a certification exam pretty early. And if you were one of the first people certified, that might carry some weight because, that means you're in the technology, you're using it. But after about 6 months to a year, all the question dumps are out there. And it's pretty easy to go past sort of we'll call it an old school certification, right? Some of the ones that I have. Now with the way Azure is and the certifications being rewritten every single year, there's still people claiming they have all the question dumps and things like that, but I don't think that's nearly as true.
Yeah.
And I think that having gone through those certifications, having to put a lot of our team through it for our Microsoft partnership and our competency, we're one of the only actually consulting companies in the U.S. where the entire team is Azure certified, right, including our sales team. And so we want to get to we wanted to get to a point where we could use those as a confidence bar, right? And I agree with you. I couldn't have used those in the past.
Yeah.
But now we can. It doesn't mean it's not the end all be all.
Right.
But it certainly can help shortcut a technical interview because we can just look for gaps. We can assume a certain baseline level, and we can get a lot done in 45 minutes that might have taken an hour and a half. Makes everything more efficient. So I would like it if Microsoft would maybe not change the certifications every 11 months.
Yeah.
Mostly just because we have to keep redoing them, and that's hard on our team, and it's a lot of work.
And it's happening a lot right now.
It is happening a lot.
Yeah. So even if you got an Azure certification in the last few years, there is massive updates happening.
Yeah, they're all going to be invalid.
Yeah.
It's so we're not to Devin and I might spiral on that for a minute. So we're not going to do that. But I think from a certification perspective, if you're looking at recent new certifications that are valuable to the work that you're doing, or to maybe a new role that you think you're going to be looking for, definitely go get it. But be prepared to talk about and highlight why that certification is more valuable than the line on a resume. Absolutely. Or something like that, right? Be prepared to talk about what you actually got out of that experience and why that makes you potentially more valuable and more appropriate. And how it combines with those other 4 A's, right? And it's not just about the technical skill.
Yeah,
right?
So we didn't differ there at all, actually. For different reasons, we value the certifications more now than we did in the past. Cool. So, Adam, do you see the questions here? You want to queue up some?
I can, yeah. Let's see how we go. So we've got a good question here. So can you address disparate teams that include IT and the business unit? Because decentralization has value since they can prioritize their business unit, but it's difficult to establish standards without direct line authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Veronica. Disparate teams can be a challenge because a lot of times different people in the team report up through different structures, right? They're operating as a team, kind of like a special operations unit, right? Where some Navy SEALs, some Delta Force, some Army Recon, and they all kind of report up. But in that specific example, there's always a commander of that special ops team, right? There's not anarchy out in the field. And so, my advice would be to try to rally that team around the same thing that you would rally a data team around or something like that, right? What are the outcomes that team is responsible for? Especially a shared team or a disparate team like that, where you're closer to the business to hopefully drive faster business results, faster insight, faster time to market, better analysis, better understanding of the business and the technology capabilities across those people. I would sit down with that team and say, look, what are we really trying to accomplish as a team? How would we kind of score ourselves on our ability and our progress, right? And let's be honest about where the gaps are. And then I wouldn't worry so much about sort of whip cracking goals. And I would set the goals as a team. And if your team is not following along with those goals, or you're not happy with the way that's going, find a new team or find a new job.
Yeah.
Data market's super hot. For great qualified people, you can always find a place where maybe the team is, a little further up the curve toward world class, right? Yeah,
the only thing I'd add to that too is, and I think this kind of complements what you said, is you still need that one source of defining standardizations, defining data governance. That's going to be difficult to do against a bunch of disparate teams. And we see this a lot too. It's funny, we'll see a lot of times where, of course, there's IT, and when it comes to tools like we've been talking about Power BI today quite a bit, when it comes to tools like Power BI or Tableau or any of the others, there's a lot of subsets of the business side that'll develop teams that also, almost like a rogue IT that exist, and oftentimes sometimes that can cause issues, sometimes that can actually be helpful, where you have those departments that are developing solutions that eventually might become an IT solution, or they stick within the department, as they should in many cases. And within that department, the department kind of flourishes and is able to solve a lot more problems a lot more rapidly than they could if they always gave those problems over to IT.
Yeah, so there's a couple other really good questions here. I know we're running short on time, but just for everybody's sake, I had a couple questions on what the 4A's were again. And so I'll just put that slide back up just so you guys can see that. And if you have specific questions on any of those, we're happy to jump in. But
let me ask you a question about that. Which of the A's do you see, and it's going to vary for everybody, which do you see people struggle with most?
Wow. You know what? The one people struggle with the most is actually acceleration.
Okay.
Because I know lots of people who have a good attitude. They're great from an aptitude perspective, and they're even pretty adaptable because they're pretty agreeable to switch gears and try different things. But speed is a muscle.
Right.
Speed is an organizational muscle that you have to train. Mm-hmm. You can't just wake up one morning and go, okay, we're going to move at 1.5x. Right? It's not like listening to an audiobook and just increasing the speed. Right? That's where I think bringing in people who maybe have worked in a startup, right? Or maybe who have worked in a company that's like venture backed where they have to move very quickly to achieve growth, right? Or, there's real consequences. Bringing in some of that from the outside, right? Bringing in, a consulting provider, even like Pragmatic Works, or somebody where, we know what it takes to move projects at a certain speed, can help push the team without overwhelming them, right? We kind of bring them along, kind of help them re-baseline at whatever is appropriate for them. So there's a great question in here for sensitivity around it. I'm not going to say who it's from, but how do you determine when it's time to give up on a team member that's not interested in improving themselves? And what do you communicate to the rest of the team when you remove that person from a team or the company?
Yeah, my initial thoughts are, we talked about setting certain goals. And if you've set those goals, and I would get buy-in from the person initially too, hey, these are the goals we have set for you. We've worked on these together. It's not like I've created these and putting them on top of you, but we've worked on these goals together, and we continue to not make any progress on the goals. It's kind of clear cut. Then I think you've kind of documented what our plan is to move forward, and you're not on board with us. Then we just aren't on the same bus together here. We shouldn't be on the same bus.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I think there's a couple things, right? One is you want to re-level. Say you always want to give somebody a shot, right? They're there. They're part of the team. They're there for a reason, right? Where maybe they're not great now, but they earn their keep at some point, right?
And we've seen some people that have made some, even
absolutely,
on our team,
they just needed the right target,
right?
A lot of times you think the goals and the targets you're setting are clear, and they're not. Mm-hmm. And you bring people in, they're like, "Look, I'm happy to do that. Just tell me what does that mean?"
Right?
And should they have come and asked? And should all? Yes, right. Everybody could always communicate better, but I think for me, it's especially important. To give that person a shot. Sometimes that's, a quarter or two, right? Depending upon you always talk to your HR department and all those things, right? Make sure you're in line with your corporate policies. But in terms of communicating to the team, in 99% of the scenarios where I've had to let somebody go or part ways with somebody who wasn't sort of pulling their weight or wasn't improving themselves or whatever the reason was, the team was expecting it long before we did it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Usually when we announce, hey, so-and-so is no longer with us, we wish them the best for their next endeavor. Usually we don't share details about why somebody wasn't performing. That's not really appropriate. The team is like, oh, wow, that took longer than I expected it to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you have a team where everybody else is sort of pulling their weight, they're looking to you to either, sort of fish or cut bait, right, at that point in time. And so, I think from that perspective, it's important to act with integrity and give that person an honest conversation and an honest chance and help them understand the consequences if they don't take advantage of that. Usually I also find that if somebody is given that choice and they really don't intend to improve, they find something new on their own quickly and they'll shortcut that whole process for you.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to be a person of integrity and have that open conversation, give them a shot, and then also have integrity for your team and understand that your team needs everybody rowing in the right direction. So that's a great question. Thank you for submitting that. I think that's pretty much all the questions. There's a question in here on Python, specifically around data science and ETL from Mahesh. Mahesh, I'll answer that really quickly. Python is one of the most widely used sort of data let's call it data engineering languages. It's used in analytics. It's used in data science. It's very popular. It's one of the top 2 that's used. In terms of details on the language and how it rates like 1 out of 10, it's sort of, subjective, but it's certainly up in the 7 to 10 range because most folks are using it for a lot of those types of, capabilities. So hopefully that helps point you in the right direction.
And when you see other tools start to, like Power BI, I keep coming back
Right.
to it, starts to integrate in with Python, that's definitely a language that has some sticking power there.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Devin, thanks.
Yeah, this was great.
This was awesome.
Well, we appreciate you guys joining us today. And
we had like 150 people say, why don't Devin and Adam do webinars every week?
I love it.
Maybe I just imagined that.
Did you write that in there? Is that a question from Adam?
Yes, it says question from Adam Jorgensen.
Well, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. And look forward to the next one with you.
Yeah, if you guys could help us out, you'll get a survey with just one question. Just help us out. It continues to help us pick the right content for you. Helps us know, when to follow up, when to leave you alone, all that kind of good stuff. So we take that stuff really seriously. So let us know if there's anything else you'd love to have webinars and content on. And we hope you have, since we gave you permission to make today your Friday.
Yep.
Right? Have a great weekend.
Take care, guys.
Thank you, everybody.